Welcome everyone. Thank you so very much for taking time out of your schedules to join us today. Hopefully you're in the right place. This is a webinar hosted by the National Association of State Boards of Education entitled How Prosocial Education Can Support Students' Well-Being and Workforce Readiness. We'll give it a minute for people to join in. Once again, welcome on this hopefully what's a beautiful Thursday afternoon or morning in your part of the nation. And I'm coming to you from Ohio, where we have a little bit of sunshine going on here. It's been a rare commodity lately, but it's warming things up. This is we're the National Association of State Boards of Education. This is our webinar on how prosocial education can support students' well-being and workforce readiness. We're featuring some amazing work taking place in the great state of Missouri. So I'll give it one more minute before we get rolling. We use a variety of different functionalities here in Zoom. If you are, you should have ability to access the chat. Please feel free to introduce yourself with your name and organization and what is motivating you to join today's webinar. It's an amazing topic. I know you will come away having learned a number of things and maybe excited to explore further information and maybe even take action around prosocial education. That's our intentionality, is to help familiarize our audience with what prosocial education is and the benefits of it and the great research that stands behind it. As I mentioned, my name is Paulo Di Maria. I'm the president and CEO of the National Association of State Boards of Education. For those of you who don't know very much about the National Association of State Boards of Education, we go by NASBE. We are an association of the individuals who perform outstanding service as citizen voices on their state boards of education, some of whom are elected, some of whom are appointed. We operate as a pretty classic style member association. So we provide our members with publications, networking opportunities, conferences, webinars like this one, technical assistance, support. We engage in a certain amount of advocacy, and ultimately with the goal to develop and support these individuals who serve as state board members so that they can do their part in creating excellent education systems in states and ensuring that every student gets a high quality education. Couple of norms for today's meeting. This webinar is being recorded and the recording will be distributed. We have enabled closed captioning. Please use the Q&A box. Some of you, Zoom has a number of different configurations. Typically, the Q&A box can be found in the More. If you have three dots at the bottom of your screen and More, you'll see Q&A there. We'll be monitoring the Q&A throughout the experience to make sure that we can answer questions in real time. There will be a period for question and answer at the end. If you have, we will use the chat to share helpful resources and links. We also invite you to share things that you might have that are relevant to the conversation that we're having today as well. So we're going to get started. I just want to say a few words and by way of context setting. And I think, you know, when I think about what we're about to talk about here, I start with kind of the end in mind, right? Because all of us are joined together in the interest of helping students to be successful and to be prepared for their future learning, for future careers, for future life. And a lot of times, you know, historically, we've thought about what happens in the classroom as being about, you know, the acquisition of knowledge and skills from an academic perspective and so forth and so on. But increasingly, we've come to understand that it's really much more than that. And it's much more than that on kind of two fronts. One is it's important that we create the conditions for that learning experience to be an excellent one, right? And so that really speaks to the school culture and climate, the way students interact with each other, the way students interact with the adults in their school buildings, and how do you create those conditions? So one part of it is that school climate aspect. The other is actually developing in our students that set of skills that allows them to function effectively as social creatures, right? The school is a social setting, but they will find themselves in many, many social settings throughout their lives because we as humans are social creatures in your family, in your workplace, in your, you're on a sports team, you're in a choir, you attend a church, you're a member of a club. All these things require interactions with other people. And it's important that we develop those skills in the context of the educational experience, both for the benefit of students, but also for the benefit of the climate that we create. So these things really go hand in hand. So today you're going to hear about some amazing research and activity taking place in the great state of Missouri around pro-social skill development. And it'll be explained to you what we mean by pro-social skills. So I'm not going to get ahead of the conversation. But sometimes I think about it when I think back to my own education. I remember on my kindergarten report card, there's this plays well with others. And in so many respects, that concept kind of captures in a very essential way what we're really talking about here. You'll also hear that, a lot of these kinds of programs tend to be curricular, like you can purchase a program that then a school can implement. But the reality is this works best when it's woven into the fabric of the school experience, that it's a relational experience, not simply some sort of curriculum, and that there's a deliberateness to it. So it's an area of interest we see very much among our members because they understand that in order for there to be an excellent educational experience, you have to have these kinds of social skills at work and students learning them. And so we are bringing to you all a wonderful panel. We're going to start with some of our friends. Kim Bailey is a former member of the Missouri State Board of Education. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist. She has a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in marriage and family therapy. And she's joined by Dr. Christi Bergin, who is the director of the Prosocial Development and Education Research Lab at the University of Missouri. She's an applied developmental psychologist and a leading expert in prosocial education, or how schools can help students become more respectful, caring, and cooperative. She's the co-founder of the Network for Education Effectiveness that has over 285 member school districts. We also have joining us, and this is particularly of a great pleasure for me on behalf of NASBE, 3 State Board of Education members in Missouri. Mary Schrag, who's the president of the board, Pamela Westbrooks-Hodge, and Carrie Casey. I'm not going to go into the detail about their introduction. I'll let them introduce themselves when we get closer to their component of this presentation. But they're amazing individuals doing great work on the Missouri State Board of Education. So without further ado, Kim, I'm going to turn it over to you to get us started with the substance of this webinar.
Take it away. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So I want to, Dr. Bergin, I'll let you flip that over. I want to start with talking about the elephant in the room. We know that whenever we talk about social emotional learning, the SEL, the big, nobody wants to address it, people start getting twitchy. So I also know that there's been some legislation promoted trying to allow parents to sue educators if they teach social emotional learning. And so we know this is a really volatile time around this topic. So it is so important that our solutions are bipartisan. So we'll go into the details of this, but the bipartisan, we received bipartisan support on this, both state in Missouri, but also nationally. So Dr. Bergin's research on this has been funded by the U.S. Department of Education, both under Biden and under Trump. And so this is a bipartisan solution. But let's talk about all the feuding issues. So liberals want all of this to lean toward kind of that DEI lens. Conservatives want education just to stick to reading, writing, and arithmetic, and to quit indoctrinating the students. And if they do anything, it just needs to be character focused. Our business leaders want our students to have employability skills. Our education leaders want success-ready students, and our teachers just want our students to be respectful and quit dysregulating the classroom. So our solution addresses all of these pain points and has received bipartisan support. The beauty of Missouri State Board of Education is it's made up of 4 Republicans and 4 Democrats, and this work received unanimous support by both sides. So I want you to write 4 things. So I want you to write approach and focus, which is we're going to highlight how we're doing that different. That doing nothing is not an option. It's too big of a crisis. Solutions must address all pain points. And the definition of crazy is doing the same thing over and over, hoping for a different result. So this has been going on. This is not a new issue. This crisis has been growing starting 100 years ago. We, even before the pandemic, knew that it was a big issue. The pandemic just put all of those things on steroids. So let's go ahead and go. If this is a safety issue, it disrupts the learning process and a teacher burnout and lack of employability skills. So let's go ahead and, so our students, you guys know all of this, but this is a significant issue for our students. We have to do something. We can't just do nothing and think it's going to get better. So let's go ahead. For the sake of time, we're going to blow through these. So let's go to the teacher one. We all have been, all board members have been briefed on that. Teachers burnout is a crisis, and teachers are leaving the field. Their number one reason is student behavior. And we're not blaming the students, we're highlighting the system on this, that there are systems and structural changes to fix that. But their top reason, it used to be pay, but now it's student behavior. Going into business leaders, the World Economic Forum has called this a rising global issue. So both at the macro level and the micro level, we see this as a global issue. We also see this as a state issue. This is just a desperate need. So handing it over to Dr. Bergin.
So one of the things that we also have research indicating that schools are not doing, are not sufficiently building collaboration skills in students. So, and this is not just the US, this is true in Europe as well, but on the latest PISA report, only 14% of US adolescents were proficient in collaborative skills. And one of the comments that they made was that there are very few educational interventions that exist to actually build collaborative skills in students. Prosocial education is one of those few interventions. It's an interactional, systemic, universal, meaning all students benefit from it, solution. So just to kind of summarize, nationally, we are dealing with worsening student behavior, which leads to greater teacher burnout and lower retention, reduced instructional time. So we also have academic issues that are related to this problem. And then our most recent NAEP reports have shown that not only has there been a decrease immediately following the pandemic, but we are continuing to see a decrease in academic achievement. And we're getting business leaders telling us that graduates are less prepared for the workforce. So we want to reevaluate our approach and our focus on what are we doing to help build social emotional skills in kids. There's 3 basic approaches that you can take. One is curricular, which is the predominant approach, and that is you have a lesson on Tuesday morning on how to be a better friend. Then there's also a structural approach, which is that we change policies and procedures in the school. So Leader in Me might be an example, or restorative circles might be another example of that. And then the third approach is interactional. That is, we change the way that adults interact with students. And that is what prosocial education is about. It's this interactional approach.
So in therapy, I consistently have parents bring in their child and they'll say, the child is being disrespectful or yelling at me. And I'll say, do you yell at the child? And they'll say, yes. maybe we need to make some adjustments of, because for young children, they're modeling what's been modeled for them. So again, we're saying this is a systemic approach. We're not targeting any one person. We also, in the field of mental health, realize that systems can create symptoms. And so we would pull children out of different systems, and we'd put them into an institution. They would get better, and then we'd put them back into that system, and those symptoms would reoccur. So we are saying this systems approach is going to be the most efficient and effective way to address this. So Dr. Bergin talked about how our approach has been mostly curricular. Research would show that's not an effective approach. We'll get into examples of that later. We do have research showing that the interactional approach is a very effective approach. And then the focus. So we've drifted toward, our students need both intrapersonal skills and interpersonal skills. But due to lack of time, lack of understanding, lack of efficacy of application, our curriculum and our approach has drifted, our focus has drifted toward more focus on intrapersonal skills, so emotional identification, identity, rather than interpersonal skills. So what research would show on that is if your focus is more on the intrapersonal and not the interpersonal, you get students with narcissistic tendencies. So that is not the outcome we were hoping. That is an unintended outcome, but that's what we are seeing. There's many contributing factors, but our focus of SEL has been one of them. So our focus needs to be a balance between intrapersonal and interpersonal, with an emphasis on interpersonal. So none of us drift toward healthy. I don't drift toward eating carrots and exercising. I drift towards sitting on the couch, eating bonbons. But so I feel like social emotional learning unintentionally has drifted. So we need to be intentional to get back to psychologically sound, comprehensive approaches. Okay, going to the next slide. Is what we are doing working? We need to pause and evaluate that. So we have been focused on teaching physical health for over 100 years, with an additional emphasis in the 60s and 70s of, again, teaching physical health through a curricular lens. And we are now the most obese nation ever. Same with mental health. We've had a focus on this for over 100 years, again, with an emphasis in the 1980s and the 2000s, and we're now in a mental health crisis. So what we are doing does not seem to be working. So at minimum, that alone, we can all observe that and understand that to be true. So definition of crazy is doing the same thing over and over, hoping for a different result. What we hear is if we just did it with fidelity, or if we just had more time, but even with fidelity, we know we can't do it with fidelity, so we need to pivot, and we clearly know it's not working. So going to the next slide, we know there is, again, over 100 years of research. So Yale's done research, Harvard's done research, any of the big researchers have all done research on this. And the quickest way to mental stability is healthy relational skills. It's the quickest way. Every mental health professional will tell you that. They're also the most important skills for longevity of stress reduction success. When we teach intrapersonal skills, or skills of the self, without tethering them to healthy relational skills, or with a heavier emphasis on the healthy relational skills, again, it creates narcissistic tendencies and mental instability. So we have to be intentional to find common ground of all the pain points, so we have to address all pain points. We have to make sure our approach is effective, and we have to make sure our focus is psychologically sound. So going to the next slide.
So prosocial education is the intentional attempt of educators to build those prosocial skills in students using an interactional systems universal approach. These are what we mean by prosocial behaviors. It's not a term that's very commonly used in educational circles, although it's been around in psychological literature for at least 60 years now. So these are some of the behaviors that we might see in a classroom that we would classify as prosocial behaviors. So things like collaborating, treating others with dignity, applauding others' success, standing up for others, expressing gratitude. Those are all prosocial behaviors. And our 60 years of research tells us that when students have these prosocial skills, they are more likely to be successful academically. So this isn't something separate from academics, it contributes to academics. And what we see specifically in as young as preschoolers is that they have better vocabulary and emergent literacy skills, they have better math scores, they make better gains once they enter school, and they're less likely to ever be retained if they come into school with prosocial skills. In elementary school, we see higher reading, math, and vocabulary scores among prosocial kids. And in secondary school, we see higher GPAs, higher test scores, and kids who are more engaged in school. So being more prosocial is a real asset to kids for success in school. And what we find when we conduct interventions in prosocial education is that we also increase the well-being of teachers. So teachers tend to have higher self-efficacy, they're less burned out, they're more likely to intend to stay in the profession, they're just more satisfied with their job. And then students are more success ready as we are graduating students who are able to enter the workforce with collaborative skills. Students have greater mental health while they're in school, and we get those that boost in academic learning from prosocial behavior. So this is what we have learned about from our 50 years of research on prosocial behavior is even beyond this academic component, we see kids who now have better life skills. They're better able to cope with stress. They feel happier and more satisfied with their lives. There's less depression, less drug use, higher self-esteem. And then in the long term, we talk about future-proofing the kids with prosocial behavior. We get higher quality long-term relationships. We get healthier adults, so lower blood pressure, fewer cardiovascular diseases. They tend to earn higher educational degrees, have more secure, stable, full-time employment. So these are real pluses for the individual children and the communities that they live in as they become more prosocial. And I wanted to share with you a little bit of data from some studies that we have conducted in our lab. So as Kim said, we've received bipartisan financial support from the Biden administration and the Trump administration on conducting these studies. These are all randomized control studies, which is the gold standard in research. So we have a control group and an intervention group. And then we measure differences between those groups. And I just want to point out a couple of these. I know there's a lot of data here. We're seeing some tremendously positive results. A couple that just stand out to me is that teachers are more emotionally supportive of their students when we introduce them to prosocial education. The ES there stands for effect size. Effect size of 0.58 is a mind-blowing effect size in education. We consider a large effect in education to be a 0.20. So this is almost 3 times the size of what we would consider a large effect. It was so positive, I sent my team back to reanalyze the data because I said, is this even possible? I don't know. And then our second study, if you look at the burnout, we have teachers reduce burnout effect size, again, very large and even larger for teachers' sense of self-efficacy. So you can see how beneficial this is to teachers. We also found big effect sizes for students, that they report their classmates as being nicer to them. And then one of the things that is especially exciting to me from that study number 3, which is 6th grade middle school math classes in Texas, is that our teachers reported after they implemented these prosocial education strategies, they gained 30 minutes of instructional time per week. almost any teacher would love to have anything that could give them an additional 30 minutes of instructional time at no cost.
Yes, so going with this, we did in Missouri, we put together a culture and climate work team, and with the National Superintendent of the Year, the National Principal of the Year, several Teachers of the Year. And through that work team, we asked for research that all of these social emotional learning standards that are out there would be evaluated and crosswalked with psychologically sound principles. So out of 2,000 social emotional learning goals or standards, only about 60 really we would consider psychologically sound. And so to be effective is you want to target what we know through years of research is going to get you the biggest bang for your buck. And that's what emphasizing these skills do. It helps with mental stability of our students. It helps with teacher satisfaction. It helps with just better culture and climate in the classroom and in the school. And it gets you those outcomes that we are all wanting while addressing all those pain points. So specifically on this, we would suggest a universal. So research would show a universal approach is the most effective. A curricular individual approach, it does not seem to be effective. So we would recommend a universal approach, but we also know that if you just get teachers quality training in these skills with coaching, not just send them to a webinar and hope they picked it up after 30 minutes, but that you get them the quality continuing education and some coaching in this, that alone makes significant difference and you get momentum and build. That's what we've seen in the pilot programs that have been both done in Missouri and multiple other states. So most people are wanting to know when we started introducing this, are like, well, what is it? What does it mean? And a lot of times people have to interact with it to truly get it. But for your level, for state boards of education, one, I would recommend coming and seeing one of the programs that's already up and running. But next steps would be looking for programs beyond a curricular approach. We know that a curricular approach is not effective. And then we need to look for evidence of effectiveness in promoting pro-social skills. All right, so for the sake of wanting to make sure we give the board members plenty of time to speak, I'm going to go ahead and go to the what can you do as a board member. And what can you do as a board member is, again, the approach. You need to make sure that the approach of your state is not curricular, that at minimum it is structural. But we know by research that the most effective is interactional. 2, focus. You need to make sure that the goals that are in your state are psychologically sound and aren't heavily focused on the intrapersonal, but really have adequate focus on the interpersonal. And then approach and focus, train prosocial skills at all levels in the system. Again, it needs to be universal. So you can ask that it be incorporated into your teacher prep. These are amazing classroom management skills that we nationally have kind of reduced at a time when they need them the most. So in doing certificates and your leadership for your superintendents, you can incorporate that into those as that they get trained in this. For professional development, again, fund effective, high quality professional development with long-term coaching. That's the only way that makes it effective. Just doing a one and done, people don't learn those skills. And then high quality assessment. What gets assessed gets measured, or what gets measured gets done. Okay, I want to turn it over to Missouri board members because I want to give them time. They have been in these classrooms and they've experienced how significant of a bipartisan support we received on this. So in a red state, we had Senate line item, just add a line item 15 million to support this work because they wanted it in more schools. It's just received a lot of quality support.
Great. And Pamela, if you could introduce yourself and just let people know a little bit about how long you've been on the board and maybe a little bit about your background.
Absolutely, absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Pamela Westbrooks Hodge. I've been just blessed and honored to be a member of the Missouri State Board of Education for 6 years now, appointed during the pandemic, the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, and serving the last 6 years of an 8-year term. So, my background is I'm a retired general partner in financial services from Edward Jones. So hopefully you guys are clients. I co-led our internal audit division. So my wiring is always to get to root cause. And I'm a systems thinker, and that's just embedded in me professionally. But my passion from education just quite frankly stems from being the beneficiary of development. And I believe that it is that anyone, once we make those investments, can thrive and contribute and do wonderful things to advance our world. So that is my the foundation for my basis, the foundation for my passion for education. In terms of the bipartisan support, so hopefully most of you realize the political dynamics in Missouri, very conservative state. And I think Kim did a really wonderful job of kind of setting the stage of what conservatives want versus what liberals want. And our challenge was to kind of coalesce all of those needs into something that would meet all of those concerns. So we know that this issue is bipartisan. It crosses urban, suburban, rural communities. And again, we were all hearing those same concerns: student behavior, teacher burnout, declining engagement, workforce readiness gaps. And I think we all saw from our respective lenses, whether conservative or liberal, that prosocial education was the answer. It wasn't framed as some ideological initiative, but it was really presented as a research-based strategy to strengthen classroom management skills on the part of the teachers, and just to equip our students with self-regulation, regulating skills to exert their agency and control, their own behavior. So I can't wait to talk about what we actually witnessed in the classroom. But I really think, again, the framing of the evidence, the data, and all of those different groups being able to see their issues addressed in this approach really made it a no-brainer from all perspectives. And in a very conservative state, it's amazing that this one approach was able to meet so many needs. And so if we could bring Dr. Bergin and Kim to solve all the world's problems and bring everyone together. But prosocial really has been a unifying factor across all of that political division that we oftentimes see. Carrie, I would love to have your perspective as well.
Thank you, Pam, and thank you, Kim and Dr. Bergin, for making sure I'm not on mute, for certainly what you've presented thus far. Kim, it's absolutely wonderful to see you again.
You too.
And to introduce myself first, Carrie Casey. I've been on the board in Missouri for 4 years. I too, like Pam, very honored to have been appointed to this position and to have been entrusted with the great responsibility of a guardian for education for our children here in Missouri. And it's not often an easy job in the sense of the things that you have to address. but it is just so critical. And this is one of those things, as Pam and Kim both outlined and discussed. It isn't an easy discussion because so many people have a different lens in which they look at things through, and it made it hard to come together to see that, no, I think we all really want the same thing. It's just what we're calling it, how we approach it, that we have to spend time working together on to see how we get to that same outcome. And to me, that outcome is well-adjusted children. It was spoken to very well in the presentation so far, but well-adjusted students grow into well-adjusted adults. We are absolutely a nation, a world of many differences, which is wonderful and beautiful. But unless we're well-adjusted, we're not going to be able to live and work together to address the problems that just naturally arise. So this work is critical. The work that was done before it was introduced in Missouri, certainly evidence-based. The work that both Kim and Dr. Bergin did, very extensive. But what then happened in Missouri was just beautiful, just further proof. As Pam said, we can't wait to talk about the results here in Missouri. The further proof of what was done and what was demonstrated in Missouri only convinced me further the importance of prosocial skills and their universal ability to universally address the needs of our students.
I don't know that Mary's been able to make it yet, so let's go back to Pamela, and I want you two to kind of talk about your experience of actually experiencing one of the prosocial classrooms and the parameters around that and why that gave you hope.
Yeah, I would love to. So just for reference for everyone, Carrie and I are on the eastern side of the state in Missouri. I'm in the 1st Congressional District, which is more urban. It's got St. Louis City and the northern parts of St. Louis County, and Carrie's in Chesterfield and in our suburban areas and in Congressional District 2. And so what we see collectively on our side of the state are several school districts with high concentrations of poverty, a lot of trauma. And so you often associate that trauma and that concentrated poverty, I hate to say this, with race. Potosi, the school that we visited, has equal, if not more, trauma. And completely different racial dynamics, but commonality in terms of, concentrated poverty, the trauma, et cetera. And so a very similar use case, but just different racial dynamics. And so going into the 5th grade classroom, and I think we were at Trojan Middle School or intermediate school, so we arrive at the school, we go into the classroom, and all the students are ambassadors, and they're welcoming us into their classroom. And now keep in mind, we haven't gotten the briefing yet, but what we don't know is that just 3 months ago that these kids were, they were high trauma kids. And so we're greeted warmly. They give us an orientation on their classroom and what they're doing. And so I was immediately struck by their ownership, their agency, how they all were ambassadors. The warm greeting, they made eye contact, so they were very confident and comfortable. And, we complain about that as adults, that kids don't make eye contact and they mumble and they won't address us and all of that, but none of that. Like I said, they introduced themselves. They explained what they were learning and what they were working on. And then we got to see them pair up and work long division. And we were all just grumbling because we don't remember learning how to do division that way. And we couldn't do those problems. So they're doing these long division problems and they're paired up and they're collaborating and helping each other, a stronger student with a weaker student. And they were owning each other's successes and failures. And I've never seen anything like that. And so to find out that just 3 months ago, that those children were in a really different state and not where they were at that moment, it was just mind-boggling to understand that they had made so much progress in such a short period of time. There was one student, I think we learned that her mother, I hate to say this and make anyone uncomfortable, that there was I think she shot herself in front of, yeah, and Kim is
Yep.
nodding. And so there
Yep.
was one child there with extreme trauma, I think witnessing a parent being killed in front of her, and just drug addiction and all of that. And that was the student who was receiving us, giving us an orientation on the classroom. So we left there blown away and never having personally witnessed anything like that. I want to pause there and ask Carrie to add her remembrance to that day. It was so impactful. And I hope I've done it justice.
Oh, Pam, to me, you have, it was so impactful to me personally. Just seeing the breadth of the issues that those children were facing. There were multiple examples of what Pam described in different forms that were shared with us by the teacher when we had more one-on-one time without the students in the room. I would add that the students, to all of the description Pam gave, they were just enthusiastic. They were happy. They had energy. They were engaged. They were proud of themselves. They were wanting to share what, not just what they were doing, but they really were sharing like why it was so important, what it meant to them, how it was changing them. Little story after story of individually how just in the 3 months time, their own personal behavior had changed. This is what the teacher shared with us as we sat around in a little round table while the students were at lunch. And described the history to each child and then where they had come from and where they appeared to be now and the behavior differences. As important to the children's changes was the teacher. The teacher conveyed to us that prior to the start of the school year, she was quitting.
That's right.
An 18-year teacher was leaving.
That's right, Carrie.
The teacher burnout. And they said, please, would you stay one more year, and talked about this program. She agreed. She said now she's so excited. She loves her job again. And it was just, and is still, to my knowledge, is still there. When we last saw her two years past that, she was still there. And,
Yep.
you know, taking on broader roles within within this responsibility there. It was, so it was heartwarming from the kids' perspective. It was heartwarming from the teacher's perspective. And I also believe that translated to also some helpful, it was helpful to the families that were involved as well, because this was not limited to just affecting the children, but the children were taking it home.
Yes.
The interactions between the teachers and the families, they were just seeing, you know, like was having exponential benefit. So that's, I think, yeah, I just can't say enough about, if we can't do anything for our children, we've got to give them the hope for a better life. And obviously the skills with which to do it. And those are both academic and these prosocial skills.
Behavioral.
If I could build on this train of conversation, say a little bit, and maybe this is a question, Christi, for you or for Kim, about what would I see different in that classroom? In other words, what did that teacher do differently to implement this program to lead to that result? Talk about some of the changes in adult behavior, right, that are taking place that manifest themselves in these outcomes.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Bergin, I'm going to do a quick thing and then I'm going to let you do the details. So as a trauma specialist, licensed mental health professional, small change, just doing it just a little different, just like working with a physical therapist, you just have to tweak it and do just a little different, makes huge changes. And that's what this is doing. So it might sound small, but I'm saying through a trauma specialist lens, these small differences make huge impact. So go ahead, Dr. Bergin.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. It's not rocket science. In fact, it's kind of embarrassingly simple, what we teach teachers to do. And the two powerhouse strategies, we teach them a few things, but these are the powerhouse ones that we work on. So the first thing is we work on increasing praise for prosocial behavior. It's not praise for compliance. It's not thank you for getting your book out. It's thank you for being kind and helping your classmate. You are a kind person. So we teach them specifically effective forms of praise, and we try to increase the amount of that praise. And then the other thing that we do is we replace what is called power assertive discipline, which you can think of as the or else. If you don't do this or else, something's going to happen to you, or you're going to receive this consequence, or whatever. We replace that with because. Don't do this because you're interfering with your classmates, or what is your effect on other people? So we try to use discipline to give them a reason for changing their behavior that is oriented towards the well-being of others, so that they can become self-governing and the teacher doesn't have to govern them anymore. So those are, it's simple conceptually, and we just work on helping teachers increase those behaviors in their classroom.
And Dr. Bergin, I would add a sense that I took away too is the children began to own their behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Carrie, thank you for saying that. Yeah. That their agency and that self-regulating or regulation, that stood out. That stood out for me. And I would say I left there thinking every teacher needs this training so that their ability to manage behavior in their classrooms is amplified, because that's where the frustration lies, right? You've got all these behaviors and you don't have the psychological skills to manage that. And so what social professional development does is it gives these teachers these psychological techniques to better engage these behaviors to get the outcomes that we want, and the interactions between students that we want to see. I think my summary conclusion was that the potential for creating great culture and climate by using prosocial classroom management techniques was tremendous.
Are you all in Missouri seeing this spread to multiple districts? I'm curious about the $15 million. Was that to fund research or to fund implementation pilots? What's the take up? Are schools migrating to this new or to the prosocial approach?
Yeah, I will answer that. So unfortunately, it got vetoed on the governor's desk. But it was to fund more programs. They wanted, they called me. I didn't call them. They called me and they said, how much money do you need to get this? Because I took them on some tours. These are the top senators in our state. And I said, I don't know, maybe 7 million. And they said, 15 it is. They said, what percentage do we get for 15? I was like, for 7, you get this percentage. And and so they doubled it because they wanted more percentage. So the beauty of it is that Dr. Bergin is still receiving funding from the U.S. Department of Ed, and pilot programs are continuing to manifest in other states. I would say it's such a hostile environment that educating people that we're not recommending doing the same thing that we've always done, and we're just putting a different name on it. And we're actually doing something different. The approach is different. The focus is different. The focus addresses all the pain points. And then just through a psychologically sound lens. So I work with PTSD vets, children who've been molested. I deal in high trauma. And we do these skills with them. And we're seeing, so one of the organizations I work with, we've gotten awards from the Kansas City Police, Kansas City Fire, because of the outcomes we're seeing on this. So we know these work. These are important skills. And again, it's 50 years of research. Like, this is not rocket science. It's not new. We're just getting back to basics. So when I present on this, I talk about, we're not arguing keto versus fasting or intermittent fasting. We're just saying we've got to get back to, this is what eating fruits and vegetables is, what's healthy. And we're just getting back to basics. And we need to make sure we're doing it through an evidence-based approach and a psychologically sound focus. So Dr. Bergin, I'll hand it off to you.
So one of the things that I would think that our participants would be interested in is, so like, if my school wants to do this, how could I do it? How do I get involved? And one of the things that we are doing with the funding that we received from the U.S. Department of Education is we're creating video trainings that will be freely available to anybody on YouTube. And we also have a book about how to implement it. So we're working very hard to make this really accessible to anybody.
I would say there's a, if we can go back to that final slide, you're also welcome to reach out to Dr. Bergin. And if you'd like to do that, funding cost per outcome is phenomenal. So there's an option to just reach out to her directly.
Right. I was going to say, if the, as people recognize the potential benefit, it may be very beneficial to them to implement, regardless of whether outside funding is available. Because ultimately, I think that's kind of the return on investment proposition. I see that Mary has joined us. Mary, thanks for taking the time. I don't know if you're able to unmute yourself and maybe chime in on your perspective here as we wind down in this webinar on the great work taking place in terms of pro-social education in Missouri.
Well, I believe we were very fortunate to have Kim on our board, and it was during a time when she may have already shared, where we developed a Blue Ribbon Commission to address multiple issues that were affecting retention for educators. And I think the climate and working with the students and the family was a huge component of it. And the work that she and Dr. Bergin did was very enlightening, was very helpful. And I know that it can be at times a little controversial, for lack of a better word, that sometimes people don't want to say anything about climate and culture and the social emotional training of our youth. But as we know, being able to be part of society in a healthy way is one of the most crucial things we can teach our children.
Great observations. Great observations. We are in the last remaining minutes here. I do have one question in the Q&A. I mean, and it's kind of an interesting way to wrap up, because that actually points out to what are some of the challenges that we have today that are leading to the conditions that we're experiencing. So the question was, what parts of the American education system you attribute to and again, early on, Kim, in one of your slides, you talked about the physical health deterioration, the mental health deterioration. What parts of the American education system do you attribute to the decline in physical health and mental health declines? I recognize that there are a lot of factors outside of school that point to as well, but is it about the current education system that does not help with either of these areas that are intrinsically linked? Can you speak to that just a bit?
I'll do a quick one and I'll hand it over to Dr. Bergin. I would say, and teachers are working their hinds off. This is not, we're blaming teachers on this. I do think with our focus on testing and test scores and some of those things, it's taken away teachers' freedom to feel like they can do some of these things. And so they're more focused on, okay, you've got to get this test, you've got to get to this academic goal. And so I think that stepping back and making it a priority that this is also important in the classroom, I think frees the teachers up. They know this is important, but we've kind of drifted in what room we've given teachers to teach some of these. Now we want to make sure that it's psychologically sound and not their bent, because we have a tendency to want to just do what's important to us, and we need to make sure it's what's in the basis that everyone has agreed on in order for us to move forward well. But I think we've just kind of, because of the focus of getting everybody to college and out, some of those things, it's kind of drifted away from some of these long held classroom management skills. But then also I think that we've just lost, we drifted toward, I'm going to try and be fast, but we drifted toward, I'll be very 30,000 foot. So in mental health, we historically focus on cognitive and behavioral skills. And then a few years, 20, 30, Dr. Bergin would know the years better. We came out with emotional intelligence, and social emotional learning was developed in that time frame. So it has an emphasis on emotional intelligence, but it doesn't have much emphasis on the social, behavioral, cognitive pieces of that. And so it's out of balance, not maliciously, or it's just that was the waters in which it was developed. And so we're just trying to get it back to the comprehensive focus on the social, behavioral, cognitive, and emotional. All right, Dr. Bergin, I'll hand it off to you for closing.
I think there's a whole book in explaining, why we are where we are in terms of children's mental health and ability to get along with others. We've been, as developmental psychologists, we've been watching this trend for 50 years now. We began measuring with the Child Behavior Checklist in the mid 70s. And we found at that point in time that, we set standards or norms at that point in time. And then 20 years later, by the 90s, kids who scored at a level that was considered clinical in the 70s was then the average in the 90s. So we blame a lot of what's going on the pandemic, but we were seeing deterioration in kids' behavior much earlier than that. And the National Center for Educational Statistics actually put out a report that between 2000 and 2018, so before the pandemic hit, we saw a significant increase in disruptive and disrespectful behavior towards teachers, to the point that it was classified as verbally abusive to teachers. So this isn't something new. And in fact, we're on our second generation of it now. And there's a lot of there's a lot of ways our society has changed that is not good for children, that we could address. But I think that probably the best thing to think about is that we need to switch our focus from me, the whole me, I choose me movement, which has some benefits, but it needs to be balanced with I choose others as well. I will the good of others. And that we've lost that balance. So I think as school leaders, we can work to help bring that balance back and to give teachers permission to spend time on helping children develop empathy and self-control through this prosocial education approach.
And it sounds like, just a few small changes in the classroom and some good solid training that maybe they aren't getting as much of in their teacher preparation programs can make a tremendous difference. So with that, we are at time. I just want to thank all of you, Kim and Christi, for your presentation, and Carrie and Pamela and Mary for your perspective and for the great work you all are doing in Missouri. To me, some of the key takeaways for those who are listening, I love the fact that this came out of a group that you all put together to study a problem that you had. And I think that kind of approach is one that we see quite common among state boards of education. It's a great way to bring different voices to the table, to dig deeply into the research, to understand the data, to visit places that are doing good things and learn from them and apply those
Mhm.
lessons. And I think that's the other thing is when you see a problem, be very deliberate about what are the range of solutions? What does the research tell us? How do we make sure we implement it effectively? Because I think a lot of times we see great ideas bubble up, but implementation then falls short. And then how do we continually monitor the progress that we're making and fine tune the strategies that we're putting in place and continue to progress forward? So with that, we continue to wish Missouri luck in implementation and doing this and seeing it spread both in the state and outside the state, and continue to know that you have a friend at NASBE that will be watching you, and continue to spread the word about the good things that are happening. With that, thanks so much, everybody. Enjoy the rest
Thanks,
of your day.
everyone.
Thank
And,
you for hosting.
Keep up the great work you do each and every day for the benefit of children across the country.